Okay, this is Democracy Dies in Darkness. So this is out of the Washington Post. Georgia voting rights activists moved to block a plan to close two-thirds of the polling places in a majority black county. Okay, so this is by Vanessa Williams, not the singer. Anyway, it goes on to say that it is dated August 18th. So voting rights activists in Georgia say that they will launch a petition drive in an effort to collect enough signatures of registered voters to block a proposal to close more than two-thirds of the polling precincts in the predominantly black county ahead of this fall's general election. The plan to shutter the voting sites in Rudolph County, a rural community about 2.5 hours south of Atlanta, has drawn dozens of local residents and progressive groups to two public hearings in recent days. The American Civil Liberties Union filed a formal protest with the County Board of Elections. So Brian Kemp, Georgia's Secretary of State, which oversees elections operations throughout the state, has issued a statement urging Randolph, it's actually Randolph County, so excuse me if I did not say that name or pronounce it correctly, Randolph County officials to abandon this effort. So Kemp also is a Republican nominee in one of the country's most watched gubernatorial contests. So the Democratic nominee Stacey Abrams, a former state legislator, is seeking to become the nation's first black female governor. So two-member county election board, a third member stepped down recently, has scheduled a vote for Friday on a proposal to shutter 7 of the county's 9 polling places, citing problems including facilities in disrepair or inaccessible to people with disabilities. But some activists are suspicious of the board's motives, noting that Randolph County is more than 55% black, a black community. And so a large percentage of the voters in this county are black voters or would-be voters. And so the suspicion I've read about this, like maybe last week or last weekend rather, that they're suspicious that they're closing these polling sites because they're located in communities where the majority of the voters would be black voters. And so they feel like it's an intentional move. And the thing that they're claiming that are problems with these sites, they feel that they could have repaired this way before this time. They waited till the last minute, and now they feel like the need that they have to repair these sites because of these problems. They claim it's in disrepair, inaccessible to people with disabilities. And so they feel like that's just an excuse that these people are giving because they really want to make it inaccessible to people of color. So the county, which covers 431 square miles, has no public transportation system. And so that's the other problem. So they feel like this area, this highly populated area of black voters also is an area where there's a lot of poverty, and they feel like it'll take an extra effort for those people that live in that community to go out of their way to go somewhere further out to vote. And they feel like they're targeting these communities intentionally, which is not a surprise if that's the case. And it sounds like it because they've had a history in these same particular areas with voting issues. So all 9 of the polling places were used for the May primaries and less than a month ago for statewide runoffs, in which Kemp helped by an endorsement from President Trump, beat Lieutenant Governor, if I said that correctly, Casey Cagle for the GOP nomination. So local news outlets reported heated discussions at the meeting on Thursday and Friday, with residents and activists alleging that the move was aimed at suppressing turnout in the county, in which more than 55% of the voters are Black and have backed the Democratic candidates in the statewide elections. So the county officials and the consultants there they hired said the closures were necessary because the sites were not compliant with Americans with Disabilities Act. And there was not time to fix them before the November 6th general election. So that's what raises the suspicions. Why did they wait so long to realize that they needed to fix these polling sites? And they did it right around time when it's really crucial for people to vote. So they also suggested that the affected residents could vote by absentee ballot. So you don't solve problems of accessibility for people with disabilities by reducing access for people without disabilities, said Andrea Young. Exactly. Executive Director of the Georgia ACLU, which wrote a letter to the board stating that the closures would be a violation of the Voting Rights Act because it would have a negative effect on African American voters as well. So the group noted that African American make up 96% of the voters at one polling site slated for closure. So unsure whether the board would or will be persuaded by the arguments for keeping the polling places open, some activists will try to stop the plan by using a state law that forbids the closing of voters' polling sites if 20% of the registered voters is in the affected percent, object to change. So the county currently has just over 4,000 registered voters. So NSCUFOT, Executive Director of the New Georgia Project, a voter registration and education group, said that activists will begin collecting signatures on Sunday, spreading the word at a morning church service. So we want to see to it that hundreds of students we register at Andrew College and the people we've registered at Randolph are able to exercise their sacred fundamental right to vote. So UFOT said. Okay, so the goal is to submit the petition before the board's scheduled Friday vote. So a similar petition drive overturned a decision 2 years ago by elections in Macon-Bibb County to re-elect a polling place from a school to the sheriff's office. So these polling place closures are part of a stark pattern that we are seeing across Georgia, whereby officials are working to make it harder for African Americans and other minorities to vote, said Christian Clark, president of the executive director for Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. So the more committees mobilize to turn out the vote, the harsher the voter suppression efforts undertaken by officials. So we are prepared to use every tool in our arsenal to ensure that African American voters are able to have meaningful access to the polls this election cycle. So New Georgia Project was launched several years ago by Abrams to register and mobilize voters, especially voters of color and young people. So Abrams no longer has a formal role with the organization, but Abrams, a former Democrat leader in the Georgia State House, and Kemp had a contentious relationship over the group efforts to sign up new voters. So she has accused the Secretary of State office of using illegal and discriminatory tactics to keep tens of thousands of potential voters off the rolls. So he has accused the New Georgia Project to trying to add fraudulent voters to the rolls. So it's been back and forth with these two politicians. So legal challenges have been filed for both sides, but Abrams and Kemp seemed to be in agreement that Randolph County officials should not go through with the plan to eliminate the polling places. So they do agree on that. And so Abrams issued a statement saying that every Georgian in every county deserves to have their right to voice represented at the voting booth and in the government. So I am the only candidate in the race with a proven track record of fighting to make sure that every Georgian can make their voice heard and vote, of course. So Kemp said in a statement, as soon as we learned about this proposal, we immediately contacted Randolph County to gather more information. Although the state law gives localities broad authority in setting precinct boundaries and polling locations, we strongly urge local officials to abandon the effort and focus on preparing for a secure, accessible, and fair election for voters this November. So if asked if Kemp has the authority to overrule local elections officials if they go ahead, the closures spokeswoman Candace Boyce said via email that Georgia Bipartisan State Election Board has authority to adjudicate potential election law violations. So under the state law, Kemp serves as a chairman in his capacity as a Secretary of State. So she added that the board can pursue violations of the state law and bind local officials over the Attorney General's office for administrative prosecution. If, for example, the locality does not follow notice requirements to implement a precinct or a polling place proposal. So several groups, including the Georgia Democratic Party, Common Cause, and NAACP, have called on Kemp to step down. So from this position as Secretary of State, while he runs for governor, so they say it is a conflict of interest for him to make decisions about election laws and procedures while he's seeking the state's top elected job. So Kemp has said that he will stay in the office until his term ends in January. And so this is the big problem that has been going on in Georgia as of now, is closing a lot of polling sites that are primarily in areas or communities that are highly populated or concentrated with Black residents and would be potential voters. And so I saw this article, it brought it to my attention, and I would also believe it would be very suspicious, because why would they wait so long to say that these polling sites needed more accessibility for people with disabilities and they needed to be more, ready, prepared, so people can use them to vote? And why did they wait till close to election time, especially such a crucial time at this point, what have you? And now they decide they want to close them for repairs. It doesn't make any sense. It's just like saying, the kids are starting back to school. The schools are not in good repair, so we have to close the schools down. And the schools are going to be closed on the very important day or week, the first couple of weeks, when kids should be in school or should be prepared. They're already, they've been on a summer, and all of a sudden they say, we're going to close the schools down for about 2 more months. And so they've elongated the summer, and so people are like concerned, like what's going on? So it alters everybody's schedule, it messes everybody up. Because we haven't gotten it prepared for people with disabilities, which all schools are supposed to have all of that access for people with disabilities, and anybody is supposed to have access to it. And so why would you, and so therefore they're going to bus students to further out places, which would further inconvenience families. So it's the same deal, but only this kind of, they're throwing the race thing in on it. And so that makes it, more problematic. And so that's the reason why they don't think that this is fair at all. I don't think it's fair. I think something's going on, and I would be suspicious as well. So give me your thought and feedback on this particular article. This is one of those articles that makes you go, why would they wait right around that most crucial time, election time, to decide that they needed to close these polling sites. And they happen to be in highly populated areas of people of color. So, what are your thoughts and feedback on this? Ladies and gentlemen, I find that this is very suspicious and problematic, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is another tactic to keep people from, voicing their voter rights. Thanks for listening.